My parents are demanding that I buy them a house, or they'll punish me, but instead, I make them take out a loan and disappear, leaving them to pay it. Hello, I'm Tom, and I live with my parents Natalie and Donald, and I have a big problem. I recently graduated, and now have a great job where, if I put in enough effort and time, I'm sure I can go far. But I want something more. I have other dreams, and I want to pursue them, but not while risking my financial future and my parents. My parents don't want me to bet on myself because they don't believe in me. Honestly, they never have. From an early age, I realized that my parents were different from other parents. While other parents worked hard to keep their children happy and give them everything they could, my parents never cared about that and were very lazy. They earned just enough to put food on the table and barely paid for things. We live in the same rented apartment where I was born, and that's because the rent is great. Growing up, I thought my parents would die in this place because they said they loved it so much. But I was wrong. They're not willing to die here because now, in the present, they want to move. I think it would be fair to say that my parents were very stingy with money. They didn't give me money, and they never bought me things. Not that I'm complaining, because now I understand they didn't earn much, but they could have, and just didn't because they didn't feel like working full shifts every day. It was never about me, and they let me handle most things alone. They were lucky that I was born a responsible person, and I learned quickly. I learned most things on my own, and my friends helped. Many of my friends offered me lunch and snacks because I had no lunch or money to buy it. I'm grateful for many of the people I grew up with. The worst part about my parents was that they never celebrated my birthdays. I used to go to my friends' birthdays, and I was very envious. As a child, not having a birthday makes you feel like the world is ending, and I used to fight with them a lot about that. It was one of the only things I used to argue and pester them about because I understood everything else. Plus, as soon as I was able, they made me do all the household chores, claiming they were tired from work, even though they worked less than my school hours. I remember those days when I would come home from school immediately to do chores, and at first I hated it and cried at night. But little by little, I got better and started to enjoy it. It became more like a ritual or exercise for me, and I enjoyed cleaning the house with music and washing the dishes. Within a few years, I started cooking too. Honestly, I'm very glad they made me do that because now I love doing household chores and cooking. Cooking good food with whatever's available is a great skill. By doing chores, I earned a little money from them too, saved it, and celebrated my birthday with a cake. It sounds sad when I put it that way, but back then, it was one of the happiest days of my life. I remember cutting the cake with some friends around me, singing happy birthday. I get emotional thinking about it. It's a very good memory. I'll tell you one good thing about the kind of life I've lived. You learn to appreciate the little things that most people don't. Having food whenever and wherever, having money to buy clothes, watching movies in theaters, and buying whatever you feel is necessary absolutely feels like a dream. Because it was a dream for me as a kid due to how I was raised. When I turned 15, I knew I needed to find a job where I could work after school and chores. I knew that would be a little difficult since not many people wanted to employ someone like me. So, after searching a lot, I finally found a small part-time job at Dave's garage. I must say I owe a lot of what I have now to Dave. There, I met a genuine mechanic who could fix almost anything in a car, even household items. He didn't have any formal education, but he learned from his father. It was pure instinct. Dave taught me absolutely everything I know about cars, and I'm very happy he took me under his wing. At first, he didn't want to give me the job, but when I explained why I wanted to work, he agreed. I don't think he expected me to be interested in learning about cars or that I'd become good at it so quickly. Dave and I became friends, and not a day goes by that I don't think about him. He passed away about a year ago. By the time I was 16, I was already so good at fixing things that I was earning almost as much as my parents combined. I think I forgot to mention that when I got the job, my parents were very happy that I was going to contribute. I wanted to tell them I was doing this to have extra money to buy school supplies, clothes, and things, but they were so happy that I couldn't. By the time I started earning well the following year, I was paying the full rent and buying groceries from time to time, along with covering all my expenses. Obviously, this wouldn't be sustainable in the long term, but my parents simply told me they couldn't help, and sometimes even suggested I drop out of school and work full-time. I'd be lying if I said I didn't consider it, but in those moments, Dave convinced me to stay in school. As I already mentioned, I owe him a lot. I think this is enough to understand what I went through as a child, so I'll skip ahead a few years. It was because of my parents that I couldn't go to the engineering university I preferred. You see, Mom quit her job, and Dad barely worked, so I had to carry most of the responsibility. I was working so much that I barely slept at that time, so I asked my mom to work until I finished college, but she just flatly refused. So, I had to settle for a local university that, to be honest, was just okay. I was pretty upset about it at the time, But I don't hold too much against my parents. No matter what, they're my parents and I love them. It's my duty to take care of them. And to this day, I repeat that to myself every day. It makes me feel good to take care of them. I recently graduated and got a good job that will help me support myself and my family. For now, I could just focus on working and building a good life for us. But I want something more. During college, I thought a lot about what I wanted to do with my life. Obviously, I want to take care of my parents, and I want my dad to stop working in a few years. No matter how they raised me, I want them to have a happy life, but I also want to follow my dreams, which is to open my own maintenance business. I want to open a shop where I can modify and repair cars, bikes, and other things too. Obviously, it's a big dream that requires a lot of work, but I'm ready for it. After college, when I got the job, my dad told me he was going to quit working in a few months. I told him I needed him to work a little longer because I needed some support, and I explained that I had some plans and needed to save money for them. He didn't ask much about it and was pretty happy with the money I was making, but I had no idea they were planning something. A week ago, I decided I wanted to move out, but I didn't know how to tell my parents. Don't worry, I'm not wasting money. I'm planning to move into a small room with a kitchen and bathroom. I did all the calculations and found out I could save enough and live happily by doing this. This way my parents wouldn't have to deal with me, and vice versa. Also, I want to live alone. I want a little freedom, since my parents are incredibly strict with me even now. I don't want to break their hearts by not listening to them and acting like, just because I'm earning money, I can do whatever I want. But before I could find the courage to go to them and tell them I plan to move out, my parents beat me to it and told me something so crazy. They told me they wanted me to buy them a house. They wanted to move into a new house, and they wanted me to pay the mortgage. I asked if this was a joke because it sounds absurd. We didn't need a house, and I didn't need crushing debt just at the start of my career. But they said they'd already done enough research and calculations, and they knew I could easily cover the house rent. They said I was already saving money and only needed to pay a little more each month so we could have a big house. They refused to listen, so I told them I had my own plans for that money, and I told them about opening my own business someday, but I didn't dare to mention that I wanted to move out. I thought it would be too much for them at that moment. However, my parents told me there was no reason for me to save for my business, or even think of one. They said I could easily pay the mortgage. I told them my dream was to start a business, but they didn't care. They said I should stop thinking about that and focus on my job, grow in it instead of wasting it. When I tried to argue, they got mad at me and told me I was being selfish. They said that now that I was earning money, I didn't want to take care of them anymore and just wanted to live on my own. They said I couldn't even give them the one thing they were asking for. After that, my dad warned me that if I didn't abandon my plan and buy the house, he would punish me. I was shocked because I'm an adult. Why would he punish me? They mocked my plan and told me that saying no was not an option. It's been a few days since the argument, and I haven't spoken to them since, nor have they tried to speak to me. I have no idea what to do. My parents are totally against my plan and want to buy a house, which I think is a bad idea. Should I give in to their demands and do what they want, or would it be selfish to do what I want and chase my dreams for once? I'm not saying I'm not going to take care of them, but there's no way I can buy them a house. Am I the bad guy for refusing to buy them a house after everything I've done for them? Please let me know. Update 1. It's been a week since my last update, and I'm sorry to say that I don't have good news. Well, I guess it depends on what you were expecting me to do, but to me, it's not really good news. Before I explain, I want to thank everyone for giving me encouragement and for not making me feel like I was the only one who thought my parents were being unreasonable. I saw many people telling me to focus on my own plan and not give in. Thanks to that, I was able to confront my parents for the first time, but I don't know if it was a good thing or not. So, 3 days after my post, my parents asked me what my answer was. They were sure I was going to say yes. I told them I didn't want to rent a house and that it was too much for me right now. I asked them to wait a few days so I could find a solution, but they said the solution should be to buy a house. I thought a lot, but no matter what I did, one thing was clear to me: buying a house was not an option. One of you told me that no matter what, they were my parents, and if I spoke to them from the heart, they would listen. Since I've done a lot for my parents, I believed they would understand if I spoke seriously and offered a compromise. So yesterday, I spoke to my mom and dad about it. It didn't go as expected. First, I told them I wasn't going to hide anything from them and told them everything. I told them I wanted to move out in about a year and save money for my business while still taking care of them and living a bit outside the family home. I told them I would never stop taking care of them and that after some time, Dad could also stop working and retire like Mom. I also promised to buy them a house in a few years as soon as I could and assured them it would be my first priority after my business. I spoke from the heart and told them how much I wanted to do something for myself and how buying a house now would affect that. So I asked them to be reasonable with me and let me do what I wanted. I thought I did well by telling them everything honestly, but it had the opposite effect. My parents got angry with me and laughed in my face for thinking they would let me move out. They also told me that my business idea was stupid and that I should stay in my job. Then they explained that there was no way I would leave that house. They said that if I had enough money to pay double rent, then I could easily pay the mortgage on their house. They added that buying a house was an investment in itself and that after them, I would be the one who would get the house. To be clear, they wanted me to buy them a house, not even for myself. It really hurts to see that they don't listen to me or care about what I want. When I told them we could buy a house later, Dad just told me simply that after everything they'd done, this was how I was paying them back. This made me furious, and when Mom called me selfish once more, I exploded in blind rage. I told them both that they hadn't taken care of me, rather I had taken care of them. Since a young age, I had taken care of myself, and despite the kind of childhood I had, I still loved them and took care of them. I told them anyone else would have left them behind and never looked back, but I cared about them and was willing to take care of them forever. I told them I'd never been mad at them or blamed them, but now I wasn't going to back down. I explained that they were the ones being selfish by forcing me to do this and that I'd had enough of their emotional blackmail. In a fit of rage, I told them I'd buy them a house in a few years or not at all. Since then, they haven't spoken to me, and they're quite angry. Update 2. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and the facts are that my parents have gone too far. I've decided I'm going to give them what they want, but not exactly. Let me explain. I guess I should start by telling you about a girl I've been dating for a few months, Amelia. I met her at work, and we've gone on several dates. Until 2 weeks ago, I could have said she was my girlfriend, but not anymore. You see, my parents decided to do something absolutely crazy to teach me a lesson and make me listen to them. They knew about Amelia, but hadn't met her. They'd only seen her once. I think they took her number from my phone and arranged a meeting or something like that. A week after my last update, I went on a date with Amelia, and things were going great between us. I hadn't told her what was going on in my life because we never talked about family stuff. She comes from a big, close-knit family, so she's seen a lot of drama and doesn't like talking about family issues. I never told her what my parents were like or what they'd been doing, which, on my part, was a big mistake. But I had no idea they would do something like this, and honestly, I wouldn't have believed it until it happened. A week went by, and during our next date, Amelia's attitude was very different. She seemed distant and a bit angry. When I asked her what was going on, she just looked at me with disgust. Then she asked me why I'd done this to her, and why I'd lied and wasted her time. I told her I didn't understand what she was talking about, and she slapped me. She said I was a horrible person. Then she told me my parents had explained how I was dating multiple women, had a child from a previous marriage that I wasn't even taking care of, and had spent the money they had saved to buy a house. Honestly, they had convinced Amelia too. How ridiculous. She broke up with me right then and there. Oh my God, I didn't even get a chance to say anything. She slapped me again, called me some names, and left. Then she blocked me on everything and made sure I wouldn't see her again. I tried going to her house or having her come to mine, but she warned me that if I showed up, she'd call the police to have me arrested. Well, this infuriated me so much that, as soon as she broke up with me, I went to see my parents and asked them why they did it. They explained it was to teach me a lesson about what would happen if I didn't listen to them. They asked me if I still wanted to leave home now. I asked them if they were really going down this path, and they just said it was exactly what I thought. So I told them not to interfere in my life again, and if they did, things wouldn't go well. But they didn't take the hint. You won't believe what happened at the office today. Today, a friend showed me a video my parents made about how they'd been raising me for 24 years, and now that they wanted something, I was telling them no. They also made up a story, making me look like an ungrateful and horrible son. I actually had to explain to my coworkers that it wasn't true. Then I came home and told them I was tired of all this. I told them I'd buy them a house and just needed a few weeks if they'd take down the video. Happily, they took it down. I was finally giving them what they wanted, but that's not really what was going to happen. You see, I was tired of their games and had something planned. I'll let you know after I go through with what I'm planning. So, I guess I'll see you next time. Update 3. It took me a few months to write this update, but it will be worth the wait. Let's get straight to the point without wasting time. About a month after my last update, I told my happy parents that they should go ahead and take out a loan to buy the house. I told them I'd pay the whole loan gradually. I explained that I needed them to take out the loan since I was going to take another one for my business in a few years. They were thrilled and easily accepted the trap. After they took out the loan, I sent them a nice dinner to celebrate, and while they were at dinner, I moved out of my apartment and settled into my own place that I'd already prepared. I blocked all their numbers, social media accounts, and had already changed my work contact to my phone months earlier. Just imagine my parents' surprise when they returned and saw that I was gone with all my things. Obviously, I stopped making all the payments I'd been doing for them. They probably looked for me everywhere, but they had no information on the loan company either. They found out where I was about 4 months later when a friend of mine accidentally told them where he'd seen me. 3 days ago, my parents showed up at my house, begging for help. They looked awful and seemed like they'd been living on the street, which turned out to be true. I invited them in and told them I wasn't going to help them anymore. They were furious, but they didn't yell. They just begged for help. They explained they couldn't pay anything, barely managing to afford food with my dad's salary, and my mom had even started working again. Since they couldn't pay for the house, it had been taken away. They couldn't return to their old apartment either, and now lived in a terrible place, barely surviving. I told them I had tried to help them, but they wanted too much and had become too greedy, so I had to teach them a lesson. I reminded them they had made a mistake I could not forgive by trying to teach me a lesson. After that, I kicked them out of my house and told them that if they showed up again, I'd call the police. They left, but not before shouting that they regretted ever having me and that karma would punish me for this. I responded, "Fine, but karma's more occupied with you right now." Honestly, my parents were complete parasites and I had to throw them out. It's funny how they had a comfortable life thanks to me, but they ruined it all because they wanted more. It's true that the more you have, the more you want, especially when you haven't had to work for it. Update 4. Before starting my update, I want to respond to those who asked if I'd gotten back together with my ex, Amelia, after everything was cleared up. Well, the truth is no. Now we keep a cordial relationship. After she learned the truth, we've crossed paths a few times and she's even invited me out a couple of times. But honestly, I didn't see the point of going out with a woman who at the time chose to believe my parents without talking things over with me first. It hurt a lot that she didn't give me the benefit of the doubt. Besides, I've been dating another woman I met outside of work, and I think it's best to keep my personal and work life separate. I'm glad I learned that lesson with Amelia. Now, this update is to tell you a bit more about my parents and what I know about them so far. After what happened, we haven't had much contact, but some things have reached me through acquaintances and the few times they've tried to talk to me. To begin with, my dad has had to work a lot more hours. Before, with the few hours he worked, he could get by because I paid most of the expenses. But now that he's lost my financial support, he's really having to work hard to stay afloat. He's had to learn that life isn't as easy when you're dependent on others. And when you lose that support, things change quickly. As I heard, he's almost exhausted from the long hours and the stress of supporting himself alone. My mom is in a similar situation. She went from not working any hours a day to having to work almost 12 hours a day. For years, she stayed at home without doing much, taking advantage of the fact that I was covering all the expenses. As you can imagine, that didn't help her at all when she finally decided, or rather was forced, to look for a job. She doesn't have the skills or experience to get a good job, so she ended up in a low-paying, physically demanding job. It's quite ironic, really. After so much time refusing to make an effort, now she's living the consequences of those decisions. The funniest part of it all was that, a few days ago, my parents came to visit me again. This time, however, the tone was very different from last time. The arrogance and demands were gone, and in their place, they adopted a much more humble attitude. They said they now understood the value of hard work, that they'd realized how hard it is to make a living. But what they really wanted was my help again, this time to rent a better apartment. They wanted me to help with the rent because, according to them, they were doing the best they could, but needed a little help to improve their situation. I laughed a bit in their faces, not out of cruelty, but because I knew perfectly well that if I started paying for them again, they'd quickly return to their old habits of being lazy and letting me take on all the responsibilities. It was a cycle I'd already lived through many times before. I didn't want to fall into that trap again. I told them that, as their son, I had already done more than enough, that I had worked and sacrificed a lot to support them, but they never appreciated it. I reminded them how, at the time, they didn't value my efforts or respect my dreams. So now, I told them it was time for each of us to take our own path and live our best lives without intertwining them. They remained silent, and for a moment, I thought they would react badly, like they did last time. But surprisingly, they didn't. This time, there was no drama or shouting. They simply got up and left, just as defeated, but silently. So that's what's been happening the last few weeks, which as you can see isn't much, since my parents can no longer take advantage of me.